like if I controlled the pod that was bound to that node to begin with, and if I exec and attach to it, I'm already restricted to the writes of that pod. But I guess at a macro level, yeah, I guess your emission plugin could do anything it wanted to do with particular types of pods it had accepted. So if you did want to put DNS on every node, or you did want to put the SDN delivered through a daemon set, I guess that's completely fine with what you proposed. Is that an accurate understanding of what you proposed?
I think what we're proposing more is just a generic mechanism to have a filter of workloads on the node that cannot be overridden by cluster admin.
Yeah, because the reason I bring up DNS or SDN, like take SDN, usually that runs with higher privilege. And so like if you were accepting the SDN to run as a pod on that type of node, then the cluster admin still would be able to exec into that pod and then break out. And so my first thought when reading it was like, you're deploying the CNI not through a daemon set, right? Or if you are putting DNS on that local machine, you're doing it through an out of band mechanism. And so like if you otherwise the exec and attach stuff would still leave you open or debug containers. Yeah, so I guess I go back to my original thought, which was the only pod that you want to run in your scenario, independent of kubelet emission checking, is the end user's pod.
Right.
Right.
Now, I forget, Dawn, you had discussed maybe another approach that one could look at, and I didn't get a chance to remind myself on that when commenting on the PR, but in general, like what I was just trying to figure out is if there were other scenarios while we're adding or exploring adding node local admission checks that we want to bring forward now, or not. That's basically where I am right now in this PR.
Dawn, you're on mute if you're trying to talk.
Oh, I didn't. Sorry, I was in another. So sorry, I didn't pick up. Yeah.
Great, cool. So how about Derek? Like I go update the PR again with your whatever the questions that you raised, and then we'll give some time for others and Dawn to look at the PR as well, and we'll discuss again.
Yeah, I would just like the admission approach is a mechanism, and then the how it achieves your goal is like the second part. And then I think clarifying the second part implies, given present state of art, nothing else can run as a pod on that node other than the end user pod. I think that at least gives like clear user guidance. Although I'd love to try to think of another way.
Not actually true though, or I mean, that's at least not how we've been thinking about this. The point of this some generic node local admission plugin system is not to ensure that only a single pod runs on the quote node, but rather just to ensure that the pods that do run on that node have a set of attributes, or rather do not have a set of certain attributes, for instance, elevated privileges. It's not to ensure that there's only one
pod. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Sorry if that, okay.
Thank you for correcting my language.
I guess what you meant is like to run just the customer pods, not anything out of band.
The pods with hosts with non-host privileges. Yeah, is how I think of it. And that any pod that required host privilege doesn't really get addressed by this proposal. I don't know if there's my kids are causing a catastrophe right now behind me, so apologies if I go on mute and delayed there for a moment. The only other question I had is it's secondary, I guess. I was thinking about other. Yeah, I'll just stick. I think I can ignore that for now. But in general, like it seems like all the monitoring and stuff you'd want to do on that node needs to be out of band. When it be done through like a node exporter or that type of thing. And so, but that's specific to your use case, I guess.
Yeah. Are you recommending, however, that we mention things like that in the app, or?
Like I think having a kubelet admission point isn't a bad thing, right? And so I think on the comments on the 21st, just saying, yes, we recognize that when a kubelet rejects this, that we could have a constantly recurring scheduling problem or that type of thing, or for the admission point, I saw use cases where as a cluster admin, if I was using dynamic kubelet config, I might want to be able to use the control plane to configure my admission points. But I also know that a lot of folks don't run with dynamic kubelet config. And so file-based sources were fine. And so I think like just maybe clarifying those two scenarios seemed fine. But in general, I'm just wondering if there were other use cases that folks wanted to bring forward. We could talk about them now. Otherwise, I didn't have any major objections to what was presented, I guess.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Dawn, I think you might have your mic off. I think you're echoing, or you were earlier. Okay, seems cool.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Derek. I'll go update it, but can others also like take a quick look and then we can discuss once again? Like Dawn, I would really appreciate your feedback once.
Yeah, I will take a look.
Okay,
Sorry, I haven't. I raised my concern last time. I think I noticed that there's some being covered during the previous discussion.
Right.
Yeah, so I will take a look. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Dawn.
Sorry for.
No problem.
Okay. I think the core thing we're trying to figure out is like if there are more use cases than one, right? I think that's probably maybe one of your thoughts, Dawn, as well. And but I'm sure we can think about it. I'm sure there are more than one. Okay, moving on. The next topic was on container notifier. Was there an update from, oh wait, I'm looking at last week, I'm sorry. The next topic here was seccomp.
Yes. Hi, it's Paul here. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Oh yeah, brilliant. Okay, so I'll share my screen here quickly just to walk through. Oh, can I share my screen by any chance?
Eric, you are the host today. You can grant him, like add him as the co-host, then he can share.
Just a quick one. Otherwise, I just share a link.
You should have rights now.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Awesome. Can you see my screen?
Yep, all good.
Brilliant. So yeah, at the moment we have about, well, that I could see 3 existing Kubernetes enhancement PRs, right? So we have one that is about seccomp becoming GA, which Tim created a while ago. And then I created another 2, which would be around extending it for creating config maps for people to create custom profiles. And then there was yet another one, which was around creating built-in profiles, adding complaint mode, and so on. So the idea that I'm proposing is we push ahead with Teams cap, which is pretty much this, to declare seccomp GA. That there's quite a few things there already on the cap, and one of the key things is pretty much deprecate the seccomp annotations, add the API fields, and pretty much fully document it. There was one key point that was a bit contentious given the other caps that we had. And for the time being, what I'm suggesting is we go ahead with local profiles and we keep that, we make that GA together with all the other changes. And the reason being is users currently rely on that already. And then all the other things that we're planning to bring to this feature, for example, other ways of creating custom profiles, things around generating profiles and so on, we would do that off tree, which would be something that Sasha will talk later on this meeting. So the key thing around here would be pretty much to first try to push this for Kubernetes 1.20 and see if we can get more people to look into this PR and also to review the API changes, which I think there were some review in the past already, but just to make sure that we're happy with that. Is there any questions around this?
I don't have any specific questions. Most of the features beta now. I don't know.
So the feature is actually alpha right now, but this is alpha pre any concept of feature gates. So it's effectively, it's sort of in this pseudo alpha GA state, I would say.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was looking at our doc, which confused me. Yeah, I guess Tim, I don't have anything that is not really well informed with a local cache to say this doesn't look good, right? Obviously if something pre-exists, many of the paths that were in the project, you still need to see it to completion. So there was nothing negative about this in my view. Were there things that you guys thought about that you kept out of this, or for folks who didn't reason about this as much?
Sorry, what was the question again?
Is there anything that when you were exploring this that you explicitly opted not to do or to remove? It looks like just
so I think one of the key issues now is that as there's no feature gates for this, people are using as is. So ideally to remove any sort of friction or anything, we would just GA as is, because people are using that, we can control that. And then going forwards, we do any changes to seccomp based on feature gates. But quite a few things that we're kind of suggesting would come off tree probably, and then we bring as we go.
Yeah, so just to slightly elaborate on that, the goal of the cap as it stands today was to not change any of the existing functionality. And so just take everything that's there, move it to GA, don't add anything. the changes are just around the API to make it an actual field and not a annotation. And then there was some question around, as was already mentioned, about the local host profiles, since that's like not a feature that's super well developed. And so we had talked about deprecating that functionality, and like, does it make sense to go to GA with that and then immediately deprecate it? Paul's logic makes sense to me. So.
So yeah, so it would be great if people could review the CAP once again. Have a look on the API changes, and yeah, hopefully we push this forward for the 120.
Are there current owners assigned to the CAP? Tim, is this something you're comfortable shepherding, or did you author this CAP and I just haven't seen this yet?
Yeah, so I wrote the CAP originally. I worked with Jordan on the API review, and then it just got kind of deprioritized for me. So I've had a hard time getting it, driving it through to completion. So I had asked Paolo if he wanted to take over.
Are you able to take ownership of the review?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that I need someone else to sign off on the API review piece. But I think that's basically done. Once we just resolve those open questions, which sounds like we've basically done. So I think this is pretty good to go.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
And Paolo, it looks like you're targeting 1.20, not 1.19 for this.
Well, if we can go for 1.19, I'm happy. I just thought that it would be too late for that, but if we can do that 1.19, I'll definitely go for that.
I don't have any concern on this to GA, this per se. The only thing I just want to ask it is because I think this SEPCON, try to promote the SEPCON to the GA is being several attempts, and due to other like the priority, we deprioritized a couple times. And the last half year and 8 months, there are many changes on the security pieces, right? So like API, all those kind of things. So I hope we have like the fun high level all together. I worry about we promote this GA, and many people actually already, even it's alpha today, some people already started using this one. And my only concern is just once we promote this GA, and then later we think about this is not part of our full security story on the node, and then and the API is not fed, all those kind of things, then we kind of like the part of security context, then we have to restart this whole thing. That's kind of the really time consuming. So I hope we have like the full picture here. Someone can drive in, and the SIG-Auth can find the whole thing and say talk about okay, all those kind of the security, like the how those between of the pod and between of the second call and all those kind of things on the node level, all those kind of things. So we know how to move forward. I understand the initial reason we want to promote this GA, but it's been deprioritized many times. So give me the question, and this is still, it is compatible with today's system or the overall design. I mean, yeah, I think that even before we talk about this one, we said, oh yeah, this is good, and let's move forward. And a couple times, and then deprioritize. So I'm a little bit concerned. It's like the waste all the time, and try to promote this GA and make all those change. And then later we basically think about, oh, maybe we have to restart over.
I think a difference between this attempt to go to GA and previous attempts were, our previous attempts were adding significant features or making significant changes, trying to make seccomp default, which has a whole lot of challenges that go with it, trying to add like a Kubernetes notion of a profile. And the difference here is we're saying this is already functioning as a GA feature. People are using it in production. Even though it's tagged as alpha, there's no way to disable it. And so let's just take what we have today and clean it up so it's a proper GA feature. And then all that other stuff that we want to add, like default profiles and managing cluster level profiles, will build independently of getting the core feature to GA. And I think there's something later on the agenda about that.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Yeah.
Okay,
Brilliant.
cool.
Thank you very
You
much,
want to go
guys.
to the next item then? It looks like Sasha.
Hey, yeah, I'm Sasha. So beside the actual enhancements to moving seccomp to GA, we were thinking about an out of tree enhancement, which is called the seccomp operator right now. So if you click on the link in the agenda, then you will find a very high level motivation and explanation about the stuff we are considering to do, which are not actually affected by moving seccomp to GA. So one example would be that, how to reconcile profiles across nodes and probably putting profiles into config maps. Further on, we could validate those profiles via custom resources, and then we would have a chance to ship those custom resources via the operator as well. We also rethought the whole seccomp story a little bit, so it could be possible that we want to merge profiles on that very high level via CRDs, or in the end, we provide something like custom profiles out of the box. So this is a pretty large amount of work from my perspective. And if we look at the very minimal valuable implementation, then we thought we could start with an enhancement which Paul Lee mentioned, which is basically about bringing profiles into config maps and then syncing them on disk. So therefore, we would have to answer the question, what would we do if we delete a profile, how to update profiles, how do we want to put those profiles on disk and stuff like that. And yeah, I would like to ask you for if you think that's a good idea, and if you think that that's a good idea, then we could think about moving it to Kubernetes 6, that we are able to move to utilize resources from the community for CI and CD purposes as well.
So I think this looks great. Generally, I'm in favor of developing and at least prototyping as much out of tree as we can. I think this is similar to if you've seen the AppArmor loader, which is a daemon set that just loads AppArmor profiles from config maps. My understanding is you're suggesting something sort of similar, but maybe a bit more advanced. One concern I have about it is I think the local host feature that this would be building on of seccomp as it is today is a little underdeveloped. And so I want to make sure that we really understand the failure modes of the local host profiles. What happens if the profile isn't there? What happens if it's updated? And all those pieces. But again, it sounds like a lot of that can be done out of tree, and maybe we'll need to kind of make some bug fixes to the local hosts in tree as well.
Yeah, that's very good points. One of the things we were talking, it's consider things like temper resistance, checking if actually that specific node supports the features that the profile is requiring, because for example, you might have specific actions and stuff. And, so there's quite a few things that we could add into that. But I do think it would be, like something like AppArmor load up, but with more things as well. But yeah.
So just to make sure I understand, the desire is to prototype this in Kubernetes SIGs, like as a new sub-project of the SIG, or are you prototyping this in the repo that you linked to here already, or what is it? Can you clarify?
Yeah, my idea would be to move it to Kubernetes 6 or create a new repository there, and also bring in, or yeah, I mean the RFC is currently part of the repository, and I saw that we have an enhancements label, which means out of 3 enhancement, but I don't think that we would need an additional enhancement because we already have a lot of enhancements which are related to SecComp.
Okay. I think if it's okay, maybe we can ensure people can read this closer and maybe give an answer next week. Is that fine?
Sure, sounds good. Thank you.
Yep. So Sasha, we have something similar that we use called machine config operator. Maybe I'll add some comments on it. You can see.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Sasha. Looks like a request to review CRI updates for Windows runtime class annotation propagating.
Yeah, hi, this is Mark. I'm just looking for a little bit of help identifying reviewers for this PR that's been open for a while. This implements some changes to the CRI API that was discussed in a KEP linked in there from, I think it was authored and reviewed in the 117 timeframe. I haven't been able to reach Lantau, who I think was one of the major inputs in that KEP.
Unfortunately, Lantau is not here today, so I will take offline and ask the Lantau after this meeting, and or maybe delegate someone in my team which have the context about the Windows container here. Yeah.
Okay, sure. I'll follow up with you in a couple of days, and if I don't hear anything.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, thanks.
All right, and looks like with about 15 minutes to spare, do we want to do a round 2 on updates for NUMA-aware scheduling?
Actually, today's round 2 is pretty short in compared to the last week. So I think it may not take longer than 15 minutes.
Okay, that sounds good, because I know last week was pretty epic.
Yeah, I remember. Could you allow me to share the screen?
Yes, 1 second.
Thanks.
Okay, I think you should have options now.
Okay, I'm checking, and I still can't. I can't share the screen yet. Okay, it's working now. Okay, so round 2, and okay, so my name is Krzysztof Wiaczyk, or you can call me Chris from Samsung R&D, and with Alexei Perevalo from Huawei, we have some brief presentation of NUMA-aware scheduling, another approach. Last week, there was a presentation about approaches to make scheduling NUMA-aware. We presented 3 approaches there, and and based on the feedback and on the questions, we came with another approach. This is the summary of the last meeting and of the approaches. And we could split approaches for two categories: the A category and the B category. And I think we decided to reject the B approach. B approach was regarding calling out the topology manager of the kubelet or the kubelet to get information if pod's requirements can be satisfied on a node or not. And here the topology plugin in the scheduler will do this calling out. And this is rejected because this could introduce the dependency between the plugin and the kubelet. And as Huang Wei said, it may be impossible to provide such a thing. And the A approaches were regarding exposing the NUMA topology information, NUMA resources, to make it possible to scheduler to use this information, and the plugin can decide or run some algorithm to decide which node can fit that pod. And actually, there is approach A2 that we may skip, and it is based on the REC proposal last week about moving topology manager to the control plane. And this is approach that we not investigated yet. And the A3 approach is based on the question that maybe we could make some deduction to schedule the pods, and this deduction may simplify the calculation in the scheduler. Alexei, are you here?
Yes, I am here. The deduction approach. The key concept of deduction approach is exporting enumerated data from the node. We need to decide how to do it. We need to define whether the topology manager policy was requested by the user or it requires on a particular node. Also, new scalar plugin, the filter plugin and a scorer plugin should be implemented. So the next slide, Chris.
Okay.
Yeah,
here you can go if you want.
Yeah, I can go. Here we list approaches for point I mentioned before. So how to know whether the policy was requested. Samsung team proposed a POSPEC extension, and here you can find the link to this cab. Also, Björn Gutschan from Samsung proposed automatic node labeling. It also could be used here. So let's go to how to present NUMA-related information. It's very interesting because here we have an options too. We can do it just by additional resources. Currently, a resource can be represented as subdomain / resource name, or subdomain could be omitted. This approach proposed to extend it with NUMA directory, NUMA with number of NUMA, not a resource name with amount of resources. The second approach, it's changing of node structure from a resource list to map of node, NUMA node, and resource list as a value. And the last one is custom resource definition. So I think we can move to the next slide, Chris.
Okay. Let me go through this one.
Yeah.
There is a key challenge from where we can get the NUMA-related data, and as each hint provider manages the information about available resources and free and the resources that are reserved, they are the best point to get this information. And for example, the CPU from CPU manager, we can get the number of remain exclusive CPUs per NUMA node. From the device manager, we can get allocatable devices, which has NUMA affinity information. And here we can find the example regarding how this information could be presented. And as you can see, we have a prefix with the NUMA node, and here information about CPU and number of remain exclusive CPUs per NUMA node, and this is not interfering with the current presentation of allocatable and capacity resources. Okay, let's move.
I apologize, to make sure I understood that. So the proposal here is that when the node reports resources, we would have a new prefix standard to the Cube project that would be NUMA and the address. Is that an accurate understanding?
Okay. So this is one of the ways. As Alexis said, this is the three ways that we can choose here, and the one is the prefix. The second is changing the structure, and the third is to introduce the CRD. And
to understand, for the prefix though, what would a device look like?
It will look like subdomain, for example, intel.com or maybe highsilicon.com / NUMA, number of NUMA, / resource name.
Yeah, I was just curious if a device would be a valid Q name or not. But maybe if you have a chance when we think through options to just have an option for what a device would look like, that would be helpful.
Okay, sure.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so the filter algorithm. Alexei, will you go through?
Yes, I can. Here is a description of the algorithm. It's a simplified version of topology manager. It doesn't do all things that topology manager does. For example, it doesn't calculate hints. It just counts whether requested resources of the port can be aligned on a particular worker node. So it goes through all NUMA nodes. Here is just a scheme. We have made a real implementation. And real implementation a little bit different because we need also here to keep a bit mask. So I think that's yeah. I think we can move to another slide.
Okay.
Yeah, here is slide about proof of concept. We implemented here topology policy in port spec, since it was already a cap about it. Also, we keep additional resources in resource list with prefixes, as we mentioned before. And we implemented a simplified topology manager as a kubescaler plugin, as it was described in previous slide. Go ahead, Chris. The first.
Sorry, can I interrupt you a little bit? Can you go back to previous slides? I want
Yes.
to.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Can I have? Okay. So when you say the define of the which topology policy is using, it is for the entire cluster, right?
Yes, it's for entire cluster.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Also, this approach also has advantages and disadvantages. And from my point of view and point of view of my colleagues, we have a lesser runtime complexity than a regional topology manager has on the worker node. So the scheduler should be faster than with a regional topology manager in the scheduler. The cons here, we don't know exact bit mask, exact hints which will be used by topology manager on the worker node. So we don't know which NUMA node will be used, and we can't guarantee proper scheduling here. Also, the second point, I think it's a maintenance problem because we can we may have changes in topology manager, or we may have different kubelets with different implementation of the topology manager and different hint providers. But this approach doesn't aim to re-implement a topology manager as is. Maybe you can find additional drawbacks.
Okay, last two slides. Sorry for skipping so fast. This one is regarding the challenge how to expose the NUMA-related data, and the answer for this problem can be to expose only topology hint supported resources such as exclusive CPUs or devices. And as it is presented on the scheme, hint providers register and update resources in the topology manager, and some part in the kubelet gets the NUMA data from the topology manager, and then it is updated in the V1 node object or on the CRD and pushed to the API server. And this may require some changes in the hint providers in the topology manager and in the kubelet. So this is the one challenge that it may be addressed in this way. And the second challenge is how scheduler plugin can determine topology policy requirement of a pod. As Alexei mentions, we have two approaches here. One is the approach that we presented in the last meetings. It was the topology policy per pod spec. And the second approach that may not require implementing the pod spec is to use well-known node labels that would describe the topology policy as node selectors for a pod. Let's take a look at an example. We have a pod spec and node selector that specifies topology policy that we want for this pod. And each node that is initialized with some kind of topology policy will have this label registered by default. And then this pod spec is taken by scheduler, and node affinity plugin will reject the nodes that don't have the required policy. As you can see on the picture, we have 3 nodes, and the third node was registered with restricted policy, and it will be rejected by the plugin. And next, the topology plugin with deduction will look only on the nodes with correct topology manager policy configured on the node. And actually, this is all the details of this approach, and we just wanted to present it to.
Chris?
Yes.
So go back a slide.
Yeah, sure.
So this right here is something that is already possible, right? I mean, it's just a node affinity selector. What I'm curious about, though, is the equation whereby something, whether it's the scheduler or the topology manager, code in the topology manager, knows that the string single NUMA node or restricted or whatever that string is, how to translate that into a topology, number of nodes, number of cores per node, etc. Where's that being done?
Okay, so this is the information that the plugin, the topology plugin scheduler can use, actually. And
right, but that logic, right, to sort of unpack the string single NUMA node into an actual recognition that means I need a one NUMA node of I don't know, and some other resources. Where is that living?
I think that will be living in the topology plugin, right?
In the topology, the topology manager on the node, or it's in the topology plugin in the scheduler, or both?
Jay, currently it's in topology manager code, so it's only in kubelet right now.
Right.
So this constant should be shared across components. It should be praised to some common praise. Oh, yeah, praise. It should be in some common praise.
Okay. Maybe it's just me. Maybe that should be a little clearer in your proposal here. It's not entirely clear that that's the case.
If I could just shortly address this, if you can see this, this is just the pseudocode from another presentation, but here in the plugin in the scheduler, let's call it topology plugin. There is a checking what policy the pod requires, and here will be logic for selecting how many NUMA nodes can be taken into consideration and not. If this is what you're asking.
And this is the code that currently is living in the topology manager, correct?
Right now, yes.
Okay, and you are proposing to essentially lift this out of the kubelet, out of the topology manager, into a plugin.
Yes, but simplified version.
Okay.
Yeah, Chris, that wouldn't that be just more of a not looking for hints from the providers or topology hints by any means, but just doing more of a resource count, right? To see, well, if this pod is requesting 3 CPUs and 2 SRVs and 2 GPUs or whatever, then you're just looking at the nodes to make sure they have those resources available on a single NUMA node, if that is the policy.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
So I know we're 5 minutes over. This is a complicated topic, and so I appreciate everyone putting so much research into it. I'm still back in square one a little bit, thinking, what does it mean if we do a prefixed resource NUMA 00/CPU3 if pods don't specifically claim that resource? But that's just a sign of how this is a complicated problem space. If it's okay, can we pick this up again next week? And I know a number of folks are meeting out of band to iterate on this, and so I think that's awesome. Do we want to just pick this topic up again next week, if that's okay?
I think that's okay, but if you want, please look at the presentation, maybe take some, I can give some comments or maybe concerns or any thoughts on this.
Yeah, we are expecting your feedbacks.
Yeah. So I think there's an echo. Just how Victor is trying to organize a little group of people who are interested in helping on the testing side. I know we've had the resource management working group in the past, and we've brought that back into the SIG, which is awesome. One thing that would help me, or maybe help others, is do we want to get a small recurring discussion to iron out some of these problems at a higher velocity? And is that something that we can send a note out to say, hey, if folks want to discuss on this topic, this is the forum, and these are the folks who are actively engaging. I know we had similar with Topology Manager in 1.18, but I'm seeing new names and new individuals that I'm not sure they're all meeting together, and maybe they are.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Derek. We have, as Chris said, we've been meeting out of band. For Topology Manager to get the beta, we were having weekly meetings and going over all that stuff and just bringing the highlights of SIGNode. And we've sort of been doing that just a little bit here with the NumaWare scheduling. But I think you're suggesting to do a more formal working group to do that. Is that right?
Or just understand like who is attending the SIG that's interested in this topic, and then can help provide review on the topic. Just getting that well understood would be helpful. And I don't want to have
side. We will have several people.
What I worry is that each of these meetings on this particular topic can turn into 45-minute sessions that I want to make sure that we allocate time as a community to have that session. And then, as you said, Victor, do some round of vetting before we come back to the broader SIG for the highlight, if possible. But that was my first thought after now in the last 2 weeks, at least knowing we're spending, I don't know, an hour and a half on this topic, which is great. It's an important topic. But I didn't know if we were getting everybody together in the right forum for it.
I'm happy to discuss it as well. Coming from OpenStack compute land, this is something that I worked on for quite a bit over there. So I'm happy to talk about it in kubeland.
Yeah, and so Jay, you know as well as anyone that this is a complicated topic. That I joked with Victor after last week's SIGNode call that it was like I was watching a PhD dissertation, and I want to give it the respect it's due because it's
absolutely
that level of context switch, and so I think I think if we can organize something like that and maybe extend what was done from 1.18, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So, do you have some ideas, logistically wise, or you want to do something like we're doing in Topology Manager meeting? Or I don't know about this working group. Do we have volunteers to sign up?
We don't need to do like a formal cube working group because we're still within the bounds of the SIG. It's more just even just sending a note to the mailing list saying, I'm exploring this space, who's interested in this space. And if folks want to meet outside of the regular SIG meeting time, as long as the time that people are meeting is public and available to the community, that's the key thing I'm looking for. And we can have conversation on this topic in the same way we have in the past with GPUs and many other special resources.
It would be good if some of the SIG leads will join to record the session.
Yeah, so that's the second topic, which is scheduling. So I agree with that, Alexander. And so just understanding who the interested parties are, and then figuring out a good scheduling time would be the second step. But obviously I've worked in this space for a long time, that I'd like to make sure that I can attend. Okay. With that, I want to be respectful for everyone's times and meetings they might have afterwards. And so thank you for presenting today, and we'll meet again next week.
I put a little thing into the agenda doc just with a list of interested folks in that. So feel free to put your name down there. Thanks.
Thank you, Jay. Bye all.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye, guys.